Testing 1, 2. Okay, new, what do you call this? New microphone, new camera. Just got the Osmo 3 and I've been challenged to do a video by my good friend Lockie. Not only just one video, but like a series of videos. The whole point is to start making content like we've always wanted to, and to do it as much as we can, you know. That's the whole point of doing these videos, so we can get used to it and figure things out as we go. So really all I've invested so far, I bought this gadget here, the Osmo 3. I've got microphones in case we want to do interviews with other people, and there's no lights. I got no nice sort of Sony camera or anything, just this, and we're just going to dive straight in. The video I decided I'm going to make, and I'm thinking that I might do a series of 7 initial videos, things that I've kind of thought about for a long time, you know. The things that impact me the most are stories that have stuck with me since I was a little kid, and that's what today's video is going to be about, but I'll get into the details of that soon. For now, I'm thinking I'm going to do about 7 different videos that follow this sort of thread of very influential moments or impactful moments in my life that carry on through today, that have offered me ways to think or advice and how to deal with very challenging life things. Let's dive into it. So I did actually write a couple of notes, like very minimal notes, while my wife and I were enjoying berries and cream as our dessert, which we love. A little bit of organic dark cacao chocolate, sprinkle it in, bit of cream, so good. And because we've got baby, we put baby to sleep. It's just now cleaning our bathroom. And I think we've kind of half done the dishes. I thought I'd finally just now take the time to write some notes and talk about this topic that's come to mind recently. And every now and then there's experiences in life that remind me of certain things. Maybe they're from pop culture. Maybe it's something my mum told me when I was a kid. Bear with me, I'm going to hopefully sort of thread a through line through all of these stories. But recently, one came to mind, and it was a movie called She's All That. And this scene sticks in my head all the time. And if you're anything like me, if you're a millennial, if you're the same age, if you watch She's All That, what was that, late 90s, early 2000s, there's a scene with the actor Freddie Prinze Jr. where he kind of goes along, I think onto this date with the main actress. I don't know who it is. She was pretty cute. I remember that. And in this scene, Freddie Prinze Jr. has to do something sort of artistic, and the girl likes it. And all he had in his pocket at the time was a hacky sack. And so there's this pressure building up. He gets up on the stage and this music starts to play over the top. It's like this heartbeat go, and you can just sense the sort of tension in the air. He pulls out the hacky sack and he just starts to sort of improv a story, a sort of artistic expression of something. And what it is, he's kicking the hacky sack. He's continually getting hacky sacks with it. He's kicking it 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and I think he's rehearsing, I'd have to check, that he's saying, you know, we have to keep the hacky sack going, like you got to keep it, don't let the hacky sack drop, don't let the hacky sack drop. And that was the whole point of this little moment on this date that he's going through, that the music starts to intensify. He starts to get further and deeper into like having a perfect sort of streak of keeping the hacky sack from falling on the ground. And then eventually it does hit the ground. Boom. That's the whole point of this little scene. And he just says the phrase, eventually the hacky sack does have to drop. So you've got like, you know, multiple times where he says, don't let the hacky sack drop. You can't let the hacky sack drop. But eventually it does. And so that scene came to my mind recently, and it brought to mind a lot of things in my mind. And at the moment, it's right now, the topic is closure. It's this idea of impermanence, that things do come to an end, and how do we get used to those endings? How can you have closure in your life, often with things that don't have closure? And so I want to throw this question to you. What does Freddie Prinze Jr. have in common with John Walsh? Now, if you don't know John Walsh, especially if you're from New Zealand or Australia, when I was a kid, there was this TV show called America's Most Wanted. And so that was like in the 90s. And there was a host of a show called John Walsh. And the part that brings it back to my childhood when I was a kid growing up, I grew up watching a lot of documentaries on TV with my mum. It's really a huge part of sort of my psychological makeup in a way. I saw a lot of how the world is through the lens of documentaries, journalists going in and, learning weird, interesting things about people and about the world. And so I'll bring it back to John Walsh in a second. I learned quite early that there are dangers in the world. I learned that children get kidnapped and things can happen to them. And my mum was very passionate about, wanting to get those bastards, or, we're just watching TV, but she'll be feeling very passionate about, people that do bad things. And when you're a kid, I must have been like, 5, 6, 7, just watching these docos with my mum. And I remember just this sense of kind of like a social justice, like, why the hell do people do this, Mum? Why would anyone kidnap someone? What is grooming? All of these really deep, dark things that some might argue, that you're probably too young to get into. I felt like it helped me to kind of understand just how tricky the world can be. And bringing it back to John Walsh, watching America's Most Wanted, I must have been just like really, really young, maybe 7 or 8, maybe younger. Just learning about crimes, learning about criminals, learning about the dark things that can happen in life. And then my mum tells me the story that the guy who hosts the show, John Walsh, she said to me, did you know he lost his child? And I was like, what? And, when you're a kid getting angry, like you can, beat adults up or something like that. I was just shocked. I was like, what do you mean? And she said, John Walsh, that man, he lost his son, who was only 6 years old. His son was kidnapped and something bad happened to him. And I was like, what? What happened to him? So if you Google it and look it up, my mum told me that this little boy was severed, that the only thing they found was his head in a drain. And at that time, I think today maybe they have actually got evidence on who it might have been, but at that time, no one knew who did it. And I remember that hit me like a bombshell, first trying to imagine, and this might seem like really dark, it never made me like have nightmares or anything. Maybe it did, I'm not too sure. But first there's the practical reality of you'd have to take someone that doesn't belong to you away, lure them, hurt them, do something like what happened to this child, and put their head down a drain. All of that evilness is just insane. It's too much to comprehend. But then I remember as a kid when Mum said, that man doesn't know who did it. And that's why he has foundations, he has charity, he's dedicated his whole entire life now to helping other families find lost children. Like one of the biggest pieces of work that he's done in their nation in America is to have a registry of lost kids so they can, they needed to, the government, the police force, they needed to improve their processes on how do they manage things like a missing child case because he was a victim of such an issue. And I want to kind of bring this back to scripture, one of my favorite scriptures. I actually didn't look this one up. And hey, one of the cool things about using the Osmo 3 for my camera instead of a phone is I can use my phone and look up research. One of my favorite, let me just look at this one. That's about forgiveness. There's a scripture, I'll look it up and maybe I'll put it in the text here, maybe if I get fancy. What the devil meant for evil, God turns for good. And I think when it comes to not having closure, you can still make a choice that does close something off, and you can live your life in a way that produces maximum good. Or that, like that scripture, what the devil meant for evil, God turns for good. You can take bad situations and turn them for good, and John Walsh did that. And at the time, like I said, we didn't know who hurt his child. I wrestled as a kid, this memory of this documentary, this moment talking to my mum. These would resurface all the time. And this is really about closure and the impermanence of things. How do you get closure with painful things such as loss and grief? How did John Walsh manage to flip it around? How do you get closure in things like a really bad breakup? I've been through those more than once. How do you have closure around things like betrayal? So this is what comes to mind. The through line, when I string this all together, even with the story of Freddie Prinze Jr.'s scene in that movie, She's All That, you can keep the hacky sack up as long as you can, but eventually it does fall. And I actually don't have it here with me, but I've got this ceramic skull. This reminds you of the impermanence of life. So, I don't know the answer for you. I know parts of an answer for me. It's going back to John Walsh's story, when I was a kid, that story impacted me so deeply that I realized that things can happen in your life that do not close nicely the way you want. Imagine having, something happen to your child in the way it did with John Walsh and never knowing who did it. And I was like, imagine not knowing who did it. John Walsh is an example of someone who chose to live his life in a way where he moved forward in a good way. He created charities. He got famous enough to be on TV, to host these shows, to help crack down and find bad guys. He might not have had the answer of who did it. I'm not sure that's important. And that is part of the maturity, I think, in discovering closure for yourself. To be able to say, I am never going to know why she dumped me. I'm never going to know why she cheated on me when she was the one that said, you better not cheat on me. These psychological hooks that stay in us sometimes when we have sort of traumatic experiences of different levels. If you had a fight with someone before they passed, I haven't had that experience, but you can imagine these scenarios, life scenarios that many people have come to the crossroads of, and have had to deal with this. And I just would hope for anyone who's watching, or even for myself, that we wouldn't idolize, or we wouldn't need closure the way we think we do. And in a way, you kind of would have to have some sort of expectation, like I needed the end of the book to end this certain way. It's kind of like having OCD. You just have to let that sort of stuff go. If anyone's dealt with it a lot better than I'm explaining right now in my first ever YouTube video, feel free to message in the comments if anyone sees this. But yeah, that's a big thing. How do you deal with the impermanence of life? How do you have closure with these challenging things? And how do you yield? So those are the scriptures. The first one is, what the devil meant for evil, God turns for good. And we can take inspiration and try to reframe and do things like that ourselves. We can follow God in those footsteps because we are made in His image. And the other thing that helps, I think, with closure is forgiveness. So I have a scripture here. Here we go, Matthew 18:22. It's the one where Jesus talks about forgiving someone 70 times, or 7 times 70 times, some crazy mathematical number. But the point was that he was emphasizing that there's near an unlimited amount of times you should forgive someone. Now that's really hard to put in practice, and that doesn't come at the expense of boundaries. You should still have boundaries, but work on forgiveness. I think oftentimes when I've had to deal with things like betrayal, forgiving them was really something that even just helps me. But it does take time and you can't force it. So it's when you come to a desperate place where kind of in your heart posture, it's kind of internal, you do come to your knees, which is a posture of humility as well, and you yield. And in my case, sometimes you cry out for help from somewhere higher. So anyways, that was the topic for today, closure. I also wanted to sort of bring it back to this different kind of upbringing of watching documentaries with your mum. It's not the most masculine thing. Dad wasn't always around. There's that part of the story, but I found it very impactful to learn about the world through docos. And it's probably why it's impacted me in a way, like in terms of loving storytelling and loving media and loving biographies and stuff like that. So yeah, I hope that's useful. I'm definitely open to hearing how other people process what to do when they don't have closure over something.